Redditors who work at remote places like forest officers, oil rig workers, etc. What creepy things have you noticed while at work? I used to work at a Boy Scout summer camp. Every week I had to take a big group of campers to a secluded spot for their wilderness survival badge where they had to build a shelter out of sticks, leaves, etc. and sleep in it overnight. The spot was only about half-mile from the main camp, but we took them a circuitous route that made it seem really secluded. Anyways, on this one night all the campers had made their shelters, we had cooked dinner, and were all just sitting around the campfire. It was getting late, maybe 11 o'clock, so I sent all the campers to their shelters for the night and started cleaning up the fire. That's when we heard in the distance what sounded like church bells. They were pretty faint, but myself and my fellow staffers could definitely hear them. They went on for about 30 minutes, ringing every 30 seconds, or so. We were all a little creeped out, as there were no churches or towns within 20 miles of us. After the bell stopped, though, the singing started. It was too faint to hear the words, but it sounded like church choir music, but a lot of people, and a lot more enthusiastic. Also, it was almost midnight at this point. The singing went on for well over an hour, sometimes quieting down until we almost couldn't hear it, sometimes getting so loud we thought it was getting closer. All of the campers were super creeped out, but I lied to them, telling them there was a church service going on in camp, and that there was nothing to be scared of. Eventually, at almost 1 a.m., the singing stopped. I found out a few days later that there had been a large KKK rally only a few miles away that night, and that's what we had heard. I know a forest ranger who regularly stays at these remote cabin, fire tower outposts. She'll wake up in the morning and look out the window to soak in the landscape only to see influencers posing for photos. I'm not sure if this counts because it's a farm, but when you live on a farm you work on a farm, so I guess I'll tell it. I grew up on a farm and in high school used to mess with my friends by hiding and making them find me. One night my friend was over and we were waiting on this other guy. We see him pull up, so we take off running to hide. It's funny because they have to wander around somewhere they're unfamiliar with or go ask my parents and be told too bad you'll have to find her. It's like forced hide and seek. Anyway, this one night I saw my friend hide in one building while I ran for the trees. I was hiding under some bushes and heard breathing. Like human breathing. There were no animals around. It creeped me out so bad I ran out of hiding to greet my friend. I felt so uncomfortable for the rest of the night. Sometime during the night my dad heard something and went out to investigate. In the morning he discovered that one of our cows was killed and butchered. I spent some time in the peat swamp forests of Borneo studying wild orangutan. We would go into the forest very early, around 4 a.m. One morning there was a clouded leopard on the trail we used to enter the forest. It was just crouched there watching us. We shouted, tried to act big. One of the indigenous people we worked with even took out his slingshot and shot rocks at it. He missed on purpose, just trying to scare it off. It stayed there for a good 5 minutes watching us before it slowly walked into the thick brush off the cleared trail. When we walked by I shined my light to where it had walked to and could clearly see a pair of reflective eyes only 3 meters away crouched watching us pass. Creepy, but also incredibly cool to see one in person for how critically endangered they are. Edit: since I've got quite a few requests for pictures, I just posted a picture I took of a baby orangutan named Merker. Edit: these were wild orangutans. We tried our best to keep our distance and never tried to touch them. The goal was to observe them while trying not to affect their natural behavior. That being said, over my year there I did get charged by one of the big dominant males in the area on 3 separate occasions, which is its own terrifying story to tell another time. He never did touch me but sure scared the hell out of me and made me run. Edit: since a lot of people are asking. I am American who studied biology in college. How I got this job was a combination of luck and preparation. I worked my butt off in college and had field experience, and then we had a guest speaker one day who is a big name in orangutan conservation research talk to us. I had always wanted to go to Borneo and got to speak with her after the talk and discovered that she needed 2 students to go do research for a year after graduation. She interviewed me and the rest was history. I do want to mention to anyone considering this field that it is hard work. We would wake up at 3:30 a.m., spent 14 to 15 hours in a swamp forest following wild orangutans, taking data every 2 minutes. It was hot, humid and tons of mosquitoes. No communication to the outside world except on our days off, where we could take a 15-minute walk to a tree stand where we could sometimes get 1 bar of service to send a few WhatsApp messages to family. The camp was only 15-ish people and we would spend 2 to 4 months there at a time before going back to the city, Palangkaraya, to bring back samples. The location of this research was in central Kalimantan, Borneo. That all being said, it was an amazing experience, of course. Saw animals and insects that just blew my minds, and I miss it all the time. Happy to answer some more questions in PMs as low as I'm not flooded. I used to work in the Gulf of Mexico on oil rigs for years, and it may not exactly be creepy, but I found it really unsettling. In deep, open water, the water itself is really clear, so everyone can plainly see all the tuna and barracudas hanging around the rig waiting for the onboard cook to throw off whatever food waste he needs to. Every once in a while a huge great white shark would swim up from underneath and snatch a tuna, and it really took like less than a second. They're really scary. I used to be a delivery driver, which doesn't sound very remote because it isn't. However, I did have to deliver to some pretty remote places. One time I delivered to a trailer park just barely inside our designated delivery zone, and it was very dark and poorly lit. I leave my car running and keep the headlights and inside lights on to go deliver the pizza. Upon returning to my car, I sit down in the driver's seat and look up to see a creepy old man standing less than 3 feet from my side of the car. He was just staring. It was the equivalent of a jump scare. I just started driving forward, had to do a U-turn to get out of the park. When I turned around, the man was standing in the middle of the road, so I freaked out for a second before speeding around him, only to watch him attempt to chase my car out of the trailer park. I put in my 2 weeks after that. I've worked in Canada's north for a few years now in oil and gas. It's pretty creepy when during night shift you realize a moose has just been standing at the tree line staring you down for an unknown length of time. Or finding bear tracks crossing the tracks you just made 5 minutes ago. Honestly, the silence of a snowy forest in the dead of night 100s of km away from anything is pretty spooky. When your only contact to the outside world is a radio channel nobody's listening to, you feel pretty alone. I was on a boat sitting on anchor in a secluded bay in the early hours, in southeast Alaska a few years ago. I stepped outside for a smoke, and all of a sudden I heard the most horrific sounds of a wild animal being murdered by another wild animal. It went on for probably 10 minutes, I know it's just nature, but man, I can still hear that sound in my brain and it haunts me. You guys, this is my highest voted comment of all time, beating out my post of a boiled yam in r/shitty food porn. I used to do agricultural work, alone in a field for 10 hours a day kinda thing. The pure amount of times I heard the sound of running and snapped up to see literally nothing there was horrific. I was convinced it was surely animals between the trees for a while, but the weirdest moment was when I heard it loudly from a row of trees next to me and immediately ducked under to see the feet of whatever animal was running by, and there was absolutely nothing. I remember trying to stay calm and walking really fast to the toilet block and sitting in there for a good long while before I came back. I never thought I'd be so freaked out in the daytime, but there wasn't a soul nearby for quite a way, and it really amped up my imagination. I do a lot of work out in the woods. Creepiest thing was finding some headless doves. I also found sticks arranged in circles and paint on the trees in the same spot. Not sure if it was part of a ritual or not, but that's what I saw. Edit. Okay, lots of great points that it could have been just wildlife or cats catching the doves. That's totally possible. I've seen cats do that before too. To add some more context, the type of doves found were not native to this area. It's possible they escaped or were released and had a run-in with a hungry house cat. And the painted circle of trees and sticks nearby was coincidence. Who knows? I certainly don't know what really happened, so it's all speculation. It's still the weirdest/creepiest thing I've ever found. I was a field geologist in the outback about 12 hours north of Adelaide. One day I was driving the truck and saw what looked like a flagpole sticking up in the middle of nowhere. I wasn't anywhere near a farm or anywhere else that people would be, so I decided to drive over and check it out. It was a dead dog fully impaled on a spike. Like, from butt to mouth. Took some pictures and had my boss call the cops, but for the rest of the assignment I was freaked out that some maniac was out there with me. Edit. I don't know if it was a domestic dog or a dingo or something. It was pretty well decayed when I found it. Second edit. I'm not sharing the pictures. Please stop asking.